Hello, welcome to Video Mania 2. I'm the dude manning the counter, Duncan, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. I have a few notes here, but I'm going to try to speak from the heart pretty much. Today I'm going to talk about the state of Hollywood and movies in general right now. I know I normally talk about movies from the past, and I'll go into why in a minute. And like I said, I'm just going to speak from the heart here, so I hope this is coherent and makes sense at the end. But I'm going to do the best I can because I want this to be authentic, because this is what I really think. And I needed to get this out. So, here's the thing. Hollywood right now, I understand with the pandemic, there's not a lot of content coming out. Production was halted and stuff like that. But I just miss the love of film and the creativity that really took place that I think is really lacking, and I'm going to explain why. When I was growing up at early 80s, there were about 20 different studios. Some made massive budget like Warner Brothers and Paramount and Disney, of course. And there were also smaller places like Canon Films that would, greenlight a lot of stuff. And there were just all sorts of companies, but there were about 20 at one point. And you could take your project there, and it was run by creative people. I mean, they were business-minded people, of course. You're in the business of making money. But they were also very creative, and they understood creativity. So when you made a pitch for something a little bit different, or something like that, they'd be like, okay, we can make that. I see what you're doing. It could be a new character or new things, because at one time, Star Wars was an original story. What else? Terminator was an original story. I mean, even Fast and Furious, it was basically Point Break with cars initially, but it was still original characters. It was a fresh thing. But now it's just sequel, spin-off, interconnected universes. And part of this started because movie studios back in Hollywood's golden age, and even in the 80s, like I was talking about, they were their own independent company, so there was no social media back then either. But they didn't have to answer to anybody, and they would take a little bit more risks because they were in the business of producing films and creating entertainment. But they also kept budgets under control. I'll explain the budget thing in a minute. But their thing was to make as much content, to make as much money as possible. And there was, the aftermarket VHS and stuff too to rely on. But it just, when the corporations were like, wow, these studios are making a ton of money. Look at all this box office receipts. Let's buy in. And they do. And sometimes movies got too big for their own good, I think. Because with Star Wars, there was licensing. George Lucas became a billionaire because of licensing. The movies made a ton of money, but the licensing, billions. So, corporations came in, and execs, from a business standpoint, they aren't creatives mostly. And so they just look at what will make money and, almost guaranteed. That's why you get Lion King remakes that I haven't talked to anyone that actually likes. Almost everybody loves the original cartoon from 1994, but the live, not really live action, it's computer animation, but different animation. But, and the thing made over $1 billion, and I haven't talked to anyone that liked it. And these were people that loved the original. So, but it was, getting back to my point, was they were just doing, what's tried and true. I think right now, somebody did some research. Disney has, in the next 5 years, 3 original stories. 3. And another thing, too, is back in the day when there was 20 studios, around 20 at one point, there was content every week. When you went to every Friday when theaters came out, there was a comedy, there was an action, there was science fiction, There was, an adult drama. There was, a kids movie. There was all kinds of stuff. Whatever you're into, it existed. And there was something for everybody. So now I think part of the reason corporations is they try to make one movie with way too much of a budget and try to appeal to everybody, and in a lot of ways you just kind of alienate everybody because you know not everything's everybody's cup of tea. That's why you do different things. If you keep the budgets down, you'll be fine. But now these things, they have to make $600 million to get into break-even territory after all the marketing and all that, and just trying to appeal to every single person. And you want to appeal to the most people, and they think you want them, a director and writer want to make them the project for themselves initially and hope other people like it. And the thing with these out-of-control budgets is, see, when I was growing up, Canon Films, you could make an American Ninja, which is not going to be for everybody, but it was made for $500,000. So you'd get your action fans and martial arts movies fans, and you could get a star that people kind of like Michael Dudikoff, who was a strong, silent type, but he had a different presence from other action stars. He wasn't giant and larger than life, but he was a little different, and people would tune in. And the thing, too, is now there's a lack of stars. I was talking to another YouTuber last night because I keep asking, when is there going to be some kind of original project or something? And he said part of it is, and he's dead right, I agree with him completely, it's Brando Critic, good YouTube channel, by the way. But the thing he's dead right is there's 2 stars now where their name alone will get your attention and make you possibly check it out, but you're at least going like, oh, what's it about? Let's look into it more. Tom Cruise and The Rock. That's it. And when I was growing up, there was, Tom Hanks was a big star for the comedies, more family movies like Big, that appealed to more commercial. But then the action guys, you had Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Steven Seagal, Dolph Lundgren, and Van Damme, who I grew up with. These guys were very distinct. I mean, they had a distinct presence, whether it's accent or what they did, they were the special effect. Like, they were unique. I mean, they were something that sets them apart, like if you had an audition with 200 actors and one of those guys walked in, there's no one else in that room like them. And there's none of that now. I mean, all the actors, and there's some very talented ones, by the way. I'm not, so they work hard, and there's plenty of them with tons of talent. But I think they need to look for those. I think if I were a producer, I want somebody that has distinctive traits, or their voice is a little different, or maybe they come from another country and they have an accent, something. And that's not there anymore either. Where the star was kind of the movie. Because when I was growing up, going through the rental stores, I saw Van Damme. I'm like, all right, I'm picking that up. And now, like I said, there's just 2. And with these massive budgets, they can't afford, and there's no aftermarket like the DVD and Blu-ray sales is not what it once was. And the streaming, you'll make a few bucks off that, but not really a whole ton of it, not to make up those kind of costs. And I wish studios would go back to, let's make more movies for smaller budgets so we don't have to break the bank, and let's try to build some new stars. Let's bring somebody that's unique and creative and allow that freedom, not hover over them. Allow them that freedom to make what they want to make, and hope it works. And if the budget's smaller, if it doesn't go through huge, okay, not the end of the world. Because now, I mean, if one of these things flops, I mean, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Whereas back in the day, one of the salvations they had was, okay, a movie didn't do as well. Like Steven Seagal's last movie broke even at the box office. But when people were in rental stores, you knew what you were getting when you saw him on the cover. You knew what kind of movie you were going to get. So they would rent, and eventually it'd make some money. Which that's not there anymore, but these stars don't have any branding anymore, And now it's just, when I was talking to Brando Critic, he made, I sent him a little chat on his live chat, but he brought up a great point is, now Captain America's the star. And it doesn't matter if it's Chris Evans or somebody else. It's Captain America's the draw. And I love Captain America too. I loved some of these comics growing up, but it's just gotten so stale to me. I'm like, Black Widow, it may be good. I don't know. I'm sure it's not awful. Most of the MCUs, some of them were quite good, but I've only had a couple where I was like, wow, that wasn't good at all. But it was just kind of same formula to me, and I'm just over it. But I think they need to have more content with the smaller budgets and invest in an actor and see what they bring. See if they're a creative type. Because Stallone, who broke himself into the business with creativity. I mean, he wrote Rocky. He's like, this is me. And I think we need to see more of that. And another thing is one of my favorite 90s action movies, Hard Target. John Woo, my favorite director of all time, came to make it. And, it was his American debut, and Universal Studios was hovering over him and wouldn't let him do his thing. And they put Sam Raimi, who did the original Spider-Mans with Tobey Maguire, they brought him to oversee it. And just in case he didn't pan out like they were hoping, Sam Raimi would take over and try to salvage it or make it the way Universal wanted. But Sam Raimi's a creative type. And so, and he was a fan of John Woo, and Universal's like, oh, this thing's getting out of hand, or, it's not what we were expecting. And Sam Raimi's like, John Woo is a master. Leave him alone. And it's a 90s action classic now. But he fought them. And he fought for his vision, because he understood. And these execs now don't see that. It's kind of like in baseball, you have all these analytics, and it's like, well, the pitcher's at 90 pitches, and statistically, he's running out of gas, so we got to pull him even though he's pitching great and lights out, and you're going into the 9th inning. Whereas if I'm a manager, I know my players. I can talk to him. Where do you stand? Are you out of gas? Can you finish this through? And ask him, and go with your gut. Because analytics, you could, okay, maybe you're right by this probability, and you bring in a relief pitcher and he blows it when you had a guy who said he was good and was pitching lights out. Why would you go against that? If I go down doing the right thing. Fine. If they ask you, what were you thinking? I'm like, I went with my gut, and I did what I thought was right. And if it's not, it's not. But, I stand by my decision. It just didn't work out like I hoped. That's the thing now. It's gotten so corporate because Universal is owned by Comcast, a major conglomerate. Disney is huge. I mean, they own all sorts of stuff. Warner Brothers is still Warner Brothers. I think Lionsgate's really the only studio I can think of, because there's only like 5 now. That's kind of it's a studio. I don't think they're owned by anything else. I'm not sure about that. But I mean, Paramount's owned by Viacom. It's just all this stuff, and I miss being excited where every Friday or every Tuesday when a new release came out, there was different stuff, and there's just not that anymore. And I'm tired of seeing $500 million worth of CGI. I remember being blown away when I was a kid, like when Van Damme, like in Bloodsport, would do this crazy athletic things. He was the special effect. Jackie Chan was the special effect. There wasn't any assistance back then. Maybe a trampoline or something for Van Damme to do a spin kick, but it was still pretty much what you saw on screen was there. You did them for real. And just being that sense of awe by their presence and star power. And now that's lacking now, and I miss it. And part of the reason I started Video Mania 2 was so people could discover these gems, because 4K collecting and Blu-ray collecting, there's still a pretty decent audience, and I want to share these older movies that may have slipped under the cracks or a new generation never knew about, like Roadhouse and stuff like that, that blew people away. And I'm hoping that one day that'll turn around, that, a new creative type, because in the 70s there was the renaissance of great directors. You had Spielberg, George Lucas, Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, um, just to name a few. That renaissance of great new directors. I mean, there's two directors now that can sell something on their name. um, Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino. They have their followings. But that's it. And I think we need to, I wish they'd just go back to that, instead of looking at every analytics to try to appeal to every single thing. Just make a smaller budget movie that knows what it is and gets out there and finds its audience. And then you could make another smaller budget movie for a different audience, and so on. And that's where I wish things would go, and I think they need to go there. So, is there anything else I need to get? I think that pretty much covers it, but this is the end. I'm sorry I went on so long, but I just need to get this off my chest. I just want that next big star. I want that next director. I want to see something new and exciting and be like, okay, that stood out. And said it's sequel, spin-off, remake, and interconnected universes, and or the movie exists as a stepping stone to the next bigger thing. I'm ready for something fresh. It doesn't even necessarily have to be the most original story, just original characters, something. And that's what I'm hoping for, and I'm optimistic. I think at some point the market is going to have to dictate, because I think there's eventually going to be, right now things are peaking with all these spin-offs and remakes, but at some point it's going to have to, the bubble's going to burst, and I think I'm really hoping there's some kind of renaissance of creativity from all different kinds of creative types. So that's what I'm hoping for. Anyway, I want to get that off my chest. It's a little bit more negative, and I try to keep things positive here. So I will review a movie later today, but this is my rant on that, and I'm sorry it went on this long. Thanks for sticking with me this long, and peace out. I'll talk to you a little bit later today. Take care.